And again, if you paddle for Pu'Uwai, I'm sorry, you keep hearing it. But there's one main thing that everybody can work on or should work on, or one defining factor from a good stroke to a bad stroke. Or one thing, if you look at a race, a race with a lot of competitive people, the top 10 or 15 are going to have a really good catch, and most people in the back are not going to have a good catch. And that to me is the biggest difference regardless of everything else. All of the mechanics of a stroke can look beautiful, but you are all taught to use our big muscles and whatever. You could be using the biggest muscles in your body, but if you're not getting a good catch, then your stroke is going to be ineffective, and your performance will suffer because of it. So, the catch is the point. And we've all heard it when we're learning. Imagine yourself on a skateboard propelling yourself with a stick, right? You're planting that thing in the ground, moving the skateboard past. So it's the exact same thing. You want to plant your paddle in the water and move the canoe past. So even though we've all heard that and we all practice it, if you look at most people's strokes, they're slipping on the catch. There's cavitation, which is any turbulence. If you can hear any noise, if you feel that thing whooshing through the water, even if it's just easy to move through the water, you're slipping on the catch. It should be hard to move through the water. And for me, what I always think and say, is find that pressure from the top arm. You want to find the resistance. When you plant that thing, it's like planting it on the ground. As this is planted, I can't drive this down anymore, and I'm moving myself past. And if you're not finding that resistance with your top arm, and you're just putting it here and then pulling, you're not planting, you're just pulling it through the water instead of moving the canoe past. And in practice, ways to do it, I think is really important to, if here's your setup, as soon as this thing starts to enter the water, if this angle is changing as you're driving down, you're gonna start cavitating. All right, so what happens with most people is that they set up here, this is the water line again, they start to drive, they bury the blade here, then they take it out, right? So they have like this much effective stroke. So what you really want to do is concentrate on setting up and pushing down like this, right? So the motion, it's not this, but it's pushing down. And when the water is moving past, there's gonna be a change in here, but the main thing is that it's entering a stationary point in the water, right? So as the water's flowing past your boat, I'm entering this point and moving it past. That makes sense? But there's a ton, you gotta commit with your top arm, right? This top arm is anchoring that thing in there. So this is driving down, and the way that you can feel it in your body is when you feel your top arm catch. It's really like setting up here, boom, you can drive down with all of your might on your top arm, and this hand's not going to go down, right? Because you found that catch. It's like you found, this point in the water, and you're moving the canoe past. And if part of what has to happen for your top hand not to drive down is that, which is the other, I think, fundamental part of a stroke, is making sure that the paddle has a lot of positive angle, right? And if you think of the stroke in terms of positive, neutral, negative, what we want to do is get rid of all of this negative, have the whole stroke be positive. So when that happens, one, from hip rotation, which most people don't get enough hip rotation, and from this, and not from this, right? Even though this looks like you give yourself a lot of positive angle, you have no power if you're in here. So if you're setting up properly, your whole body rotating into it, ton of positive angle here, to enter the water, it's one fluid motion. So I like to think more of the stroke as beginning under the water, than here, because we always think of it starting up here, but no, it's really starting here. So part of the way to do it, as you reach sort of the apex of your recovery, you don't want your body extended as much as it can possibly go, because if you're all the way here, then to get in the water, you're going to end up sort of backing off. Something's got to give, right? You can't get in the water maintaining this forward angle if you're already at the apex of your body's ability to twist when you're not in the water. That makes sense? So you want to, when you enter the water, say this is in the water now, that's when your body is all the way. So from here, my body is going to continue to come forward until it's in the water. That makes sense? So if you were to take a snapshot above the water, my hand is here. In the water, my hand is here. So when I'm fully submerged is when my body is peaked at its max ability. Make sense? Or wound up as much as it can. And find that catch with your top arm. Again, like the way that you can see, if you're just watching somebody paddle, you can see them slipping on their catch when their top hand is coming down to here, right? When they're hitting the water and this top hand is just coming all the way to the gunnel. It means that they're not finding that resistance. So the way you can tell when somebody has a good catch is when you can see that transition. You know, they're coming over, boom, and then the stroke's like that, right? You can see that, boom, that's the catch. This top hand is here. They're still driving down, but all of that downward drive is lifting the canoe up. Make sense? That to me is the fundamental part. That positive angle. And this top arm is still going to stay like this all day long. This angle never, ever, ever has to change for any reason, right? It's going to come, set up, drive, exit, recover.
So, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So there's always a slight bend in your...
So it's going to be different, but I say like a 5-degree bend, just because nothing should ever be locked. You know, like you don't want this straight. You just want it slightly like that. You know, so put it straight and then relax it a little bit. That's where you want it to be. The big one that people almost always do is put this huge angle on it, thinking that you're getting this big angle on your stroke. But either you're going to enter the water, extend it like that, or you're going to enter the water and drive through here with, you know, look at me. It doesn't look like I have much power. Yeah. The bottom, I was going to get to the bottom arm. So the bottom arm can break in my mind. You know, if it's not going to break, then I choke up pretty high, higher than most people do on my paddle. If you don't break that bottom arm, this hand's going to end up underwater, right? Because you're sort of driving like that. So in my mind, you can break just so that the plane of the paddle through the water, if this is the water line, so it's not entering here and coming to here, right? You sort of want it to enter and do that. So I have no problem with that break. I think certain clubs, that's a pretty fine point that people could coach differently. But especially on the exit, obviously it's going to have to break. One last sort of small thing is on the exit, to really work on breaking that wrist. You see a lot of people who aren't, and they're absorbing the whole motion with their arm, right? So if you drop this top arm and break this wrist, then the motion is pretty small, right? Everything's about minimizing extra motion. So by doing this, right, flaring the paddle, feathering it, coming forward, you're going to minimize that extra waste. Yeah.
So theoretically, if I were to just take a movie of your top arm only, I would pretty much see it in this zone. I would never see it.
Yeah, it shouldn't go, you know, look, at the end of your stroke, maybe it's right here. But it's going to set, drive, out.
I remember when I first started, I mean, getting a really nice plan. I wasn't in great shape and none of the muscles were working the right way. I was just trying to figure out how to get the big flat end in. Is there anything that you could say to, I mean, any kind of exercises, mental or otherwise, to make it easier to be consistent that way? Because I know, I mean, it's easy now, you know, do it like this, and then you're going out there trying to follow the guy in front of you, and all of a sudden the catch goes away.
Yeah, I mean, as I think a really good 6-man drill for that is everybody set up and hit and hold. So when you want, it one shows you where you're at. To hit and hold, meaning bury the blade all the way and hold it there. So when you first do it with a bunch of people who've never done it before, they're gonna set up like this, and then they're gonna find that their hit and hold, their fully submerged zone is like here. So you can see, oh my God, by the time I'm burying my blade, I'm already at neutral. So it really gets people to focus on how to get that entry in, because you can, the goal is to set up, hit and hold, maintaining all of this angle, right? So that this angle is really not changing. If the water's not moving, then this is gonna be like that, right? That angle's identical.
Any different for the one man?
I think it's easier to work on individually in a one man because you can do your own thing. You know, and I think on a day like today or in the Wailua River every day, to just go out at 60%, you know, and just make sure that that stroke is silent every single time. And you, yeah. It just literally has to do with getting that thing submerged all the way up here. As soon as as soon as this angle starts to change, you're gonna start slipping through the water, right? Yeah.
Can you talk about how important it is to keep your back straight as you're twisting forward?
Yeah. So I've stopped emphasizing that so much at Pu'Uwai, if you've noticed, but as far as your, and this, on your setup, all of your power, you want it coming from this twist, right? And it's from these hips moving forward. The hips are literally moving. So as you're exiting the water, this hip is gonna slide forward a little bit. As you're transitioning to get your weight in, all of your weight is on, say, the right side, if you're on the right side, and this hip is moving, physically sliding backwards on that seat, right? So you're doing this is rotating forward, and you want to be careful, and on a one man it's a lot easier to do because the seat pivots you forward like this, but you want to be careful, you know, you want your back like this and not like this, right? You just want to keep it open, and that's to preserve your back, for one. Two, the more you sort of do this, the more you're sort of like using these lower back muscles, you know, or if like this kind of motion is just your lower back, you know, these aren't very big muscles down here. I don't really have them anymore on the right side, and I haven't even noticed when I paddle. So you really should get rid of any of this. On the one man, it's hard because of that seating position. You know, on a six man, your feet are going to be well below your butt, so you can do it. On the one man, you know, it just as you do this, it sort of does this to your body. So you got to resist the temptation to curl your back. And if you look at footage of me, I'm still like this at all times. So I can't say that I'm perfect. But that answer your question, sort of, Richard? Any other questions on stroke? Yeah, Vic?
You mentioned that you choke up
Yeah.
as much as possible. Are you talking about that bottom hand
Yeah.
choking up on the lid? Is that so that you can make sure that when you drop in, you're buried?
Yeah. So it's just, oh. She just.
You're actually sacrificing some like control with that, you know, because the more you do, the less control you have with the pull, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you exaggerate it and come all the way up, you're not going to have any sort of leverage on your blade. So the more you go, the more leverage you'll get on the blade. But for me, so much about it is getting that deep, you know, and so I will choke up maybe like a whole hand width from thumb to pinky spread out from the blade. And especially if you're going like in flat water and doing the drill, like a lot of times at, you know, Pu'Uwai, I'll hold the boat and everybody's got to do it one at a time with the boat not moving to try and really find that catch. You know, once you find it, since the boat's not moving, it's really almost, you know, like moving it through the water, it's like you're moving it through a solid surface, right? So when most people start, they're moving it through easily. But the way to do it, especially when the boat's not moving, is you really got to get that paddle super deep, and to do that, you got to choke up more. So, and as the speed of the boat comes up, you can start dropping that lower hand because you don't need the depth really as much. So like when I'm really like repping my stroke, which I'll talk about in surfing, my bottom hand is dropping because my speed is way up. That makes sense because you don't need that same depth. So the depth of the blade is sort of, in my mind, a function of how fast the boat is moving. You know, how deep you need to get it to anchor it in the water. Make sense? I can't say. There's no, and it's going to be how fast the boat is moving, maybe how light the boat is, you know, like, but getting a boat started from a standstill, you're going to drive that thing all the way down to not cavitate. And it's just, you're going to naturally find that area. You know, as you come shallow, all of a sudden you're going to hit the water and it's going to suck. You can hear the sucking noise, right? And that's you just slipping through the water. And I mean, it happens to everybody at all times. You know, even, you know, you'll hear it and you just got to adjust. You know, and you just got to get to the point where you're naturally adjusting without thinking about it. Yeah.